Hi, my name is Corey Weathers. I'm a military spouse, and I'm also a licensed professional counselor that works with military and first responder couples. And I also do Strength Finder coaching using the Gallup Strength Finder assessment. Today, we are going to take some time to talk about the importance and the value of approaching your marriage from a strengths perspective. When I first started my career as a counselor, I loved all of the counseling techniques and the communication techniques and the conflict reduction techniques and all of that. But I will tell you that going through the Gallup Strength Finder assessment drastically changed my life, and it definitely changed my marriage. And I'm going to be referencing the Gallup Strength Finder assessment with you today. But the Gallup assessment isn't the only way that you can assess your strengths and know what your talents are. So as I reference it, just know that there are other assessments you might want to use or apply in the same way. But for me, the Gallup Strength Finder made a huge difference in my marriage, and I'll tell you how. Um, my husband and I had been married probably 10 to 15 years, somewhere around that part of our marriage journey, when we came across the Gallup Strength Finder. And Gallup was training us to be these Gallup Strength Finder advisors that would train up other coaches. And so we had to do the assessment and get to know our strengths. Now, Gallup talks about strengths, saying that it's our talent. It's not like your talent, like how well you play the guitar. In fact, Gallup would say that that is more of a skill. Anybody can pick up a guitar, take guitar lessons, and eventually become pretty good at playing guitar. When they use the word talent, they're really talking about what are those inner motivators? What is the inner drive that you have? What is that thing that's in that guitar player that makes them want to practice every day, that drives them to want to be the most amazing guitar player they've ever seen? That is what Gallup calls a talent. So it is this motivation, this way that you see the world, the way that you relate to others that comes so natural to you, so easy. It's almost like breathing. That's why they call it a talent. And when we use the word strengths or strength finder, what Gallup is talking about is we can naturally be talented at something. For example, you can be naturally talented at wanting to be competitive and wanting to be the best of the best. A lot of our special operations soldiers test high as competition using the Gallup Strength Finder. Understandably so, because they are driven and inspired by being a part of the group that is not only the best of the best, but it encourages them and inspires them to want to be the best of the best. And that's a natural fit for them. But perhaps you have that natural drive to be competitive. Michael Phelps would be a great example of a competitive swimmer, right? Using Gallup's definition of talent, anybody can learn to swim. That would be the skill. But Michael Phelps and his drive for, let's say, competition and wanting to be the best of the best is what he applies to that skill of swimming to be an Olympic swimmer. And so when we talk about approaching your marriage from a strengths perspective, what we are talking about is knowing what your talent is, knowing what you're good at, knowing what lights you up, what is an easy way that you solve problems, the way that you strategize, the way that you relate to your kids, the way that you relate to your neighbors. What is that inner motivation that helps you get tasks done, to accomplish things, or to get involved in your community? That natural talent, that natural drive that is unique to just you is what Gallup calls your natural talent. And when you invest in that, it can become a strength, meaning you can become the Olympic version of you if you just start with knowing what is your natural talent and what is that inner drive that is unique to you compared to anybody else. And so, knowing your strengths and applying that to your relationship can drastically shift your perspective of yourself, but also your connection with your spouse. When my husband and I first took this assessment, we were going through a lot of turmoil in this military marriage lifestyle because we were moving more than your average military family did. And we still do. We tend to move on average every year and a half. And I was really struggling with that. If I were to be honest with you, I still struggle with that. But going through understanding my strengths has made it so much easier and has helped our communication and reduce the conflict because of how moving and relocating affects me. Because when I took the Gallup Strength Finder assessment, I realized out of all of my talents, out of all the things that I was especially good at, those things that ranked at the top as far as my natural drive, my motivation, the way that I saw the world, adaptability was not at the top of my list. In fact, it was at the very bottom. It was the last strength that was there on my list, which told me it was my greatest weakness. It was the thing that no matter how much energy I invest in, I may never be much better at it than where it sits there today, right? And so Gallup has done all the research to show that when you know what your talent is, just like Michael Phelps knowing, let's say that his strength and his talent is in competition, by investing in that competition, by him visualizing him crossing the finish line, he becomes the Olympic version of himself. But Gallup has also done this research to show that if I try to invest in myself as to be more adaptable, it doesn't matter how many workshops I take, it doesn't matter how many books that I read, it doesn't matter how much energy I dump into trying to be better at adapting. I may never be great at it. It's just one of my weaknesses. And thank goodness I was able to figure that out, because the goal in having a strengths based marriage, the goal in focusing on your strengths and how it can impact you and your marriage is not about weakness fixing. It's actually about releasing yourself and saying, you know what, Corey, you may never be great at relocating. You may never be comfortable with big changes because adaptability is one of your weaknesses. And it helps me let that go and give grace to myself and go, you know what? It's going to be harder for me than maybe my neighbor. And it creates a different kind of conversation for my husband and I. And that's exactly what happened. Knowing and understanding myself and what I was good at helped me be able to take that to my marriage and say, okay, I know that I can't change the fact that the military is going to move us all the time, but we can shift in our understanding of each other. My husband realizing that that was a weakness for me helped us shift the way that we handle PCSs. Now, when we go through a PCS change or any other big change that the military throws at us, he knows it's going to take me longer than usual to adapt to that new information. In fact, we actually have a running joke now that it takes me about 4 days to process that new information. And so we kind of say to each other, he gives me that information, and then I need 4 days to think on it, process on it, and really kind of meditate actually on what that change means for me and for our family. If we try to engage in a conversation during those 4 days and vision cast and get excited about it, he knows now it's not going to go really well, because I am going to have to turn the Navy ship in my mind from where we were to now this new information of where we're going, all because we found out that adaptability was not one of my strengths. So it drastically shifted how we talk about these big changes, and it lowered our conflict, and it increased our communication, and therefore increased our connection, because we understood each other better. So when couples come to me and they say, I want to work on our communication, or we just aren't parenting well as a team, what I know that they're really asking is more about connection. It's more about wanting to connect better with their spouse than it has anything to do with words or how we're talking to each other. It's not always about adding new words to our vocabulary. When we say we want to communicate better, what we're actually asking is, I want to feel understood. I want to feel seen. More than anything else, I want to feel a connection with my spouse. And so today I want to unpack with you what that looks like from a strengths perspective, and how understanding your strengths can build that communication, increase your intimacy, bring down your conflict, and actually vision cast who you can be as a power couple, what I like to call an Avengers couple. We are a big superhero household here. We have very serious jobs. My husband is a chaplain and I am a counselor. And I work a lot of times with the tough issues and the emotions that are going on in other relationships. And so we knew we needed something fun in our household. And so we enjoy superheroes. I've been a huge Wonder Woman fan my whole life. My husband is into Marvel. His favorite superhero is Captain America. So we are kind of like the split DC Marvel household. And so you don't have to understand superheroes in order to follow along in the talk today. But just for fun, I'm going to reference it a little bit, because superheroes, especially, it can be DC or Marvel, but in our household, even the fact that we're a split comic book universe household, this plays a lot into what marriage is actually like, because marriage is this one crucible, this place where two very different people with two very different brains and backgrounds and stories come together to unite and have to work together. And I cannot come up with a better metaphor than superheroes and like the Marvel Avengers or the DC Justice League that better represents what marriage is like, even when it involves your kids, because kids have strengths too, kids have talents too. And so trying to work together as a marriage or as a family can often feel like all these superheroes with all these amazing talents and perspectives of the way that they see the world. And how do we come together and work together? It's super easy to pick up a comic book and read about one character and all their superpowers, their amazing backstory, the struggles that they have to grow and become that superhero. But it is a whole other storyline. If you follow the Marvel Avengers movie lines, bringing those characters together and asking them to work together is an entirely different thing. And that is a lot what marriage is like. And again, you don't have to use the Gallup Strength Finder. You can use the Enneagram, you can use Myers-Briggs, you can use that silly assessment tool that says I'm a golden retriever and you're an alligator or whatever those animals are, right? But the point is that all of those assessments point out that we're different, that we're uniquely made, that there is all these backstories and all of this experience that you have in your life shaped you into the person that you are today. I would argue that you were created to do something amazing just as you are with these unique talents. And once we know what those are, we can invest in them and we can become an amazing version of us. But for today, I just want you to think about what brings you joy. What do you feel good at? Some of you out there listening are especially great at empathy, right? You know what somebody's feeling. I call them my criers, right? Somebody's sharing a sad story and you're automatically tearing up because you are feeling that story with them. You're feeling all of the emotions. Perhaps when you're trying to parent your kids, you can feel their emotions probably more than they feel them themselves, or that you're pretty good at guessing what those emotions are. Some of you out there are talented at strategy. Like you are constantly thinking of all these routes. It's not just about what's the best way to get to the store, but you already have like a 6-month plan, a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, or where you want to be in 10 years because you're constantly thinking into the future. Some of you out there have a different set of talents. I call them my executing talents, your achieving talents. You're really good at organizing. You're really good at being able to execute tasks by maybe you have that amazing to-do list and you can't wait to mark them off your list. You can't wait to get them finished. And you're really good at not only getting things done and getting excited about getting things done, but then the next thing you know, you have more things going on that list because you just need to accomplish more. Here's a great example. Recently, during our last deployment, I picked up the cello because I have always wanted to play the cello. Now, I don't want to be the best cello player in the world. I don't have the talent of competition, and I don't want to be the best of the best of the best, but I love to learn. I am constantly learning. I love that new masterclass series. If you haven't heard about that, I devour that information. I taught myself how to build websites. I taught myself how to podcast. I love to learn. And so the driving motivation for me to learn cello, you heard me use the word, is I love the process of learning. And so the thing that makes me want to sit down each day is I can't wait to learn that next step, that next thing that helps me get better at cello. And so it is that inner drive, that inner motivation that you apply to tasks or apply to your relationships, that you apply to parenting, that you apply to your marriage. When you sit down, like what drives you to want to communicate better with your spouse? Is it your need for harmony? That is actually a talent, according to Gallup, that they would say that there are some of you out there that hate conflict. And the thing that makes you want to resolve that conflict is that you just want to be back together again and have harmony again and have peace. The very thing that makes you want to back away from the conflict is the same thing that makes you want to engage into the conflict so that it's over and done with and you're connected again. All these inner drives are your strengths. And so, what's great about applying a strengths based approach to your marriage and to your own life is that number one, you get to know yourself better. You get to know what lights you up, what makes you excited, what you feel good and accomplished at. So that when you are, what is that thing that you lose a sense of time doing? Like when you start organizing your closet, some of you guys are organizers out there. Do you lose a sense of time? And then you feel the sense of accomplishment when it's organized the way that you want it. Others of you are listening to that going, no, I wish I had that neighbor next to me. And if they enjoy it, they can come over to my house any day and enjoy all the closet organizing that I can possibly task them to. And that's a good sign that it's not a strength for you. So my point here is to not sell you on the Gallup Strength Finder. My point here is that the number one issue I'm seeing in the spouse community today is that we are struggling as spouses with a sense of identity and purpose. Because of the constant relocation and shifting around, we are struggling to know who we are, what we're good at, what gets us excited, what makes us feel accomplished, what makes us feel alive. And knowing what your inner motivations are and what you are naturally good at is so important for you to understand your own purpose. A lot of us go to our relationships as a way of boosting our morale, or go to our relationships to have that feeling of accomplishment or excitement or happiness. And I'm here to tell you that it has to start from inside. It has to start from within you. It has to start with you understanding yourself well enough to know how to then go out into the world and do the things that make you feel alive and on purpose. And so knowing what you're good at, listening to the feedback of other people and what they say that you're good back at, what you're good at, is the beginning to you knowing yourself and feeling really good about what your strengths are. For example, I found out that one of my strengths is that I love to grow other people. And that makes sense. I'm a counselor, right? I love to see the potential in other people. I love to see people grow. I love to see people learn, right? And so when I could apply that to relocations, I could kind of, in a way, twist my mind to start thinking about the potential of the next place, the relationships that I would develop in the next place. And that would start to help me adapt to the new information when that would normally be a weakness for me, and just have a different perspective on what that relocation was going to look like just by using my strength to help me through a very difficult time, rather than expecting something of me that is going to be always difficult. So, my number one point here is that by knowing your strengths, you can boost your confidence and you can get to know yourself, and you can really start to understand your own purpose and bring joy into your life again. Now, the second thing about strengths and how bringing strengths into your relationship can make a huge difference is understanding that we all have talents that we're bringing to the table, to the marriage table, to the parenting table, to the family budget table. We all have different perspectives of what the solution is, or our way of doing things. Now, for most relationships, in the beginning, we marry our opposite and we get really excited about those opposites because we feel like they complete us, right? And then after a few years, those things we were really attracted to and excited about become pet peeves, and they become points of conflict because they are so different from the way that we would do things. So by the time I have couples coming into session with me, they're struggling with communication, their conflict is up more than ever. But I will tell you the secret. What I find more than anything else is actually going on in that couple is that they stopped seeing their spouse's strengths. They stopped seeing their spouses for the value that they are adding to the relationship. When you get married to somebody, it is not about getting married to someone that's just like you. It is about getting married to someone who's very different from you. And it is learning how to collaborate, how to bring those strengths together and say, you bring value to my life. Not just your personality, but your way of doing things, your way of seeing things. There's value added. And I will tell you that there is a point in marriage that you get to after you kind of get through like the pet peeves and entering into conflict and my way or your way or which way is the right way. If you can get through that season, I will tell you on the other side, after 22 years of marriage, what's on the other side is you get to this sweet spot where you realize that you need your spouse to be different. You like the fact that your spouse has a different way of doing things because they bring a different perspective than you. I can now say that even though I might do things differently than my husband, and even though that might drive me a little crazy sometimes, and even though I know it drives him crazy sometimes, what we do know is that those differing perspectives create chemistry, create conversation. It gives us opportunities to work together and become the Avengers team that we want to be, simply by valuing the fact that my spouse is bringing the best version of themselves to the table, that they're actually trying. Shanti Feldhahn is one of my favorite researchers. She has wonderful books out there in understanding your marriage, understanding what your spouse is bringing to the table. And she wrote one book where she decided to study the happiest couples that she could possibly find. And I want to say she found like 1,600 of the happiest couples that she could find. And she wanted to figure out, what are they doing? What do they do to be as happy as they are? And one of the biggest things she found is that 99.6% of the happiest couples out there, it came down to one thing. One thing. Please hear me say this. It came down to the fact that these happy couples believed that their spouse had their best intentions in mind. They believed that their spouse was not trying to hurt them, not trying to harm them. They were actually trying to invest and help them and actually had the best intentions. If we can believe that our spouse is trying, is bringing their talent, is bringing their perspective, and even though they may have a hard time seeing your perspective, that they are bringing the best version of themselves and they're not trying to do harm, it can reduce conflict in an instant simply by slowing yourself down and realizing, okay, they just have a different perspective, another way of seeing this. So when you know what your strengths are, you can bring your best self to the table. You can remind your spouse, I'm for you, not against you. I'm for us, not against us. We just have differing perspectives. Parenting is a huge topic about how do we bring our strengths together. I work with so many couples where that's their biggest pain point, their biggest struggle. It's how do we conversate? How do we communicate? How do we strategize and how we're going to parent as a team? Here's my advice on parenting from a strengths perspective. Remember that your kids need to see two different parenting styles. Make sure you agree on the biggest values, those biggest deal breakers, what we believe about family, what are the rules of the household, what do we believe about respect, like what are those big values, respect. We use duty in in the military all the time, but when you apply that to family chores and how we work together around the house, knowing what those values are and deciding as a family, what do I believe? What do we believe as a united front on these values? And then starting from there, and then maybe the way that we address it may have differing perspectives and ways and approaches. Working together as a united front from a strengths perspective allows you to see your spouse. I'm going to be very stereotypical as I talk about this, knowing full well that so many of our military marriages out there look differently, act differently, and have differing strengths. But just kind of go with me as I use kind of a very stereotypical example. But it is okay for your spouse, let's say, to have strategic strengths, logical strengths, executing strengths. And so their approach to working with the kids has a lot to do with what makes the most sense and what's most efficient, and perhaps even a respect perspective of, hey, when as parents we ask you to do your chores, we're asking you to do them on time and in the right way. Versus your perspective, your strength is maybe that nurturing approach. It's that warm understanding their feelings, and that feelings are an important part of the equation, right? Having two parents come together that way and try to parent on a united front, you can see how that causes a lot of conflict if you feel like your two different approaches are really clashing. But here is where I'm excited to tell you that really bringing those together in a way that is like an Avengers team is so much more exciting and is so much more connecting for you guys as a couple. Being able to come together, have that family business meeting, come together and say, hey, little Johnny over here is really tired from swimming, from swim practice. We've been at the pool all day or whatever. And so he really needs a nap before he's going to be able to really listen and execute that chore really well. What would you think about him doing that chore after he takes a nap? Because I know we've agreed that he needs to do that. Your spouse understanding your strength of empathy, understanding that that's the value added that you're bringing to the table, increases the chances of you guys working together better as a team. But it's equally as important for you to see your spouse's perspective, that their perspective of, hey, contributing as a family is important, them doing their chores, being a person of their word, making sure that they are disciplined and doing that every day and making sure we knock those chores out every day. And not talking their way out of it is equally valuable, right? But being able to talk and value each other and what we're both bringing to the table is the key here. Here's what I'm trying to summarize for that point number 2. What I'm trying to express to you and what I'm trying to encourage you to do is to open your mind, to realize that you have these wonderful strengths for how you see and approach parenting, and so does your spouse. Getting to know what their strengths are, getting to know and value it, right? Maybe right now you know it, but it's just driving you crazy that it's not your way and it's not the way that worked best for you during deployment, right? But now when you're home together, you've got to collaborate and work together and become an Avengers team. The Avengers team is going to solve a problem or address a situation differently than that one comic book character would on their own. And that's what marriage is. Marriage and being that united front together, collaborating together, bringing your strengths together is what makes you better than if you were just by yourself. So, again, my first point is that understanding the strengths perspective for yourself increases your confidence, helps you get to know who you are and what you bring to the world and what your gifts are, so that you can go out there and find and invest in that sense of purpose for yourself. But when you bring that to the marriage, when you bring that to the family, you're bringing your gift. You're bringing your gift of how you see family and how you approach parenting and how you approach marriage, and that is valuable. But it's also important that you see that in your spouse, that they are also doing the best that they can to bring their gifts, their talents to the table too. And a lot of our conflict in marriages will go down and our connection will increase if we can see the value of what they're bringing. Lastly, let's talk about that you've got to learn how to control them. Every superhero out there, every backstory that you could possibly read on any superhero, it wasn't just that they became a superhero and then suddenly they were great at being that superhero. There was a process, there was a journey. It's the hero's journey, it's sharpening those skills, it is getting to know who they are and that identity. So, you knowing what your strengths are is just as important that it's about you learning how and when to use your strengths. So, sometimes that means that whatever you're good at, that you learn to leverage it and use it at the right time, right? I often use the example of Superman, right? He can fly, he's got great superhero strength, right? And so, let's say there's that bus that's falling off the bridge. If you've seen Man of Steel, there's that great scene where he's a teenager and the bus is kind of going off the bridge and it's about to go into the lake, and all these children are at risk, right? And so Superman uses his superhero strength to lift the bus out of the water and put it on the shoreline to safety, right? And everybody would say, "Thank you, Superman, for using your strengths for good," right? Like, we're going to all applaud and lift up Superman for the amazing thing he just did. But what would happen if he used that same strength to then pick up that bus and throw it into the lake with the kids still in it, right? We would say great superhero strength used at the wrong time and the wrong way, right? So, any of our strengths, any of the things that you're good at, they can be used for good or they can be used in destructive ways. Sometimes destructive ways is just the fact that we're using them on accident. We're just using them and not paying attention to if it's the best time and place to use them. For example, if you are leveraging your strength for empathy and nurturing towards your kids and you're exhausted, right? Because you are thinking of everybody else's feelings and never your own, you know that you're exhausted. You know that you flip almost to the selfish villain version of yourself by the end of the day, right? And that's what happens when we are living accidentally, using our strengths and letting our strengths control us instead of us controlling them. We get exhausted and we find ourselves at the end of the night. Good example with that empathy. You get to the end of the night and you say, how come nobody cares about my feelings? How come nobody puts themselves in my shoes, right? Because we are not superheroes. We are not gods. We have human strength and that strength runs out. So knowing what your strengths are is just as much knowing them, but also knowing how and when to use them, which is why having a tool to help you get to know what those strengths are and start looking for them is so helpful. It also helps in your accountability with your spouse, right? Because now you can have those conversations with your spouse and say, hey, I know that you want to approach this parenting situation with strategy, but I think what we really need to do is pay attention to Johnny's feelings. And we've got to decide, am I going to turn up and leverage my strength of empathy, or am I going to turn my empathy down and let you leverage your strength for strategy? How are we going to work on that together? So, getting to know your strengths is number one, know what they are. Number two, know how and when to use them. It is about pulling them up and pushing them down. A lot of that self-awareness, a lot of that self-control. Now, some of you out there are in situations or even in relationships where you find yourself frustrated, where you find yourself trying to use your strength, and you're facing a lot of conflict and a lot of frustration. So let me speak to you right now. If you find yourself frustrated in your marriage, frustrated in your parenting, frustrated at your job, or in your other relationships. Usually, I can help people by using their strengths kind of know what is frustrating them, or at least begin to identify what is frustrating them in that moment. And I will say, most people, when they're frustrated in their relationships, it comes down to a couple things. Either one, you are trying to use your strengths, you're trying to apply them, you're bringing the best version of yourself, you're really trying to address that parenting issue using your strengths of how you think you should best, as a couple, approach that parenting issue, right? And you feel like your spouse doesn't value it, or you feel like your spouse doesn't honor it or see that you're trying to bring the best version of yourself to the table. When we are frustrated, sometimes it's because the other people in our lives don't see the strength that we're bringing. They don't value maybe what we're trying to bring to the table. And how we ask for that can revolutionize the way that you work together. Something as simple as saying, hey, I really deeply believe that I think that the solution towards helping little Johnny is that we really need to pay attention to his feelings more often. We really need to consider the fact that he's having a hard time in school, and we might need to address that issue before we address this issue over here. And I'm really trying to bring my superpower to the table. So it's acknowledging it, asking for it, and asking your spouse to honor what you are seeing. But there's a second way that we feel frustrated as well. And sometimes it's because we are trying to force our strength into a situation similar to the metaphor of Superman throwing that bus into the lake, right? We're coming into a situation and we're forcing our superpower, forcing our strength into that situation. And it's not the best time and place to use it. And other people in your life are asking you to turn it down and consider a different way, consider a different approach, consider the value added at the table, that there might be someone else, your spouse, your kids, your coworker, someone else around you that might have a different approach that might fit the situation better. And that's so hard, right? It's so hard to know, is my way the best way, or is your way the best way? Or how do we actually work together where I bring a little bit of my strength, I accept and welcome a little bit of your strength, and together we form that Avengers team with a much better solution than if we just would have done it my way. It can be really, really hard to know the difference between those two, right? Am I frustrated because I feel like you're not seeing me and valuing what I'm bringing to the table? Or am I frustrated because I'm trying to force my way instead of accepting that you might have a different perspective that is just as valuable? Sometimes we kind of have to pause and listen to other people and their approach and the way that they would solve a parenting situation or solve a marriage conflict, and ask ourselves, how do they think about this problem differently? How are they approaching this in a perspective that's not normally the way that I think of things? We call that barrier labeling. It's another way of judging other people. You think differently from me. Like, I don't understand how you're approaching it this way, or I don't understand the way that your mind works in handling this relational conflict with strategy or logic or whatever, right? It's because our brain is hardwired to work in one way and theirs another. And so we can find ourselves frustrated if we can't see the strengths that they're bringing to the table at all. And that requires listening. It requires slowing down and saying, how would you solve this problem? How are you approaching this conflict? And what do you see as the solution? And sitting back and kind of putting a pause button on our way, putting a pause button on our strengths, and listening for the strengths of someone else can really help you see the team that you actually have, the team that's in front of you, the potential of who you could be together. So, I hope that today, what you hear from me most is that you have the most amazing team in front of you. You have the potential to become your own Avengers marriage team, your own Justice League marriage team, whatever that looks like for you. If Wonder Woman and Captain America can come together in a united way and bring our differing strengths and our differing approaches to the world, I know you can too. Get to know what your strengths are. Look for what you're good at. Ask the people around you, ask your kids, ask your spouse, ask your friends or your family members what they see that you're good at, where you light up, what your gifts are, what you do that nobody else can do as well. And get to know yourself well enough so that you are very aware of what you bring to the table and when. And then invest in that. Know how to turn it down, how to put a pause button on those superpowers. We don't need three Wonder Women, right? We don't need two Captain Americas. We definitely don't need five Hulks, right? We need you to bring the best version of yourself to the table. Your spouse needs you to bring the best version of you to the table. So get to know what your strengths are, what your superpowers are, and use them often. But you've got to know how and when to use them. Second, get to know the superpowers that your spouse has because they definitely have them and they're trying to use them. And they may need to hear those words from you, that you see them, that you see the value in what they're bringing to the table, that you need their strengths, that you need their differing perspective, and that you want to learn how to create more space for that. If you want to have more space in your relationship for you to bring your strengths, I can tell you it's very helpful for you to go to your spouse and invite them and make more space for them as well. Lastly, um, learn to collaborate, learn to bring those strengths together in a new way, learn to fight those battles as a united front in a new way. I promise you it will change everything about your relationship, and you will see your communication improve, and you'll see your intimacy grow as well. Thank you for the opportunity to invest in you. Happy Military Marriage Day, and I can't wait to hear from you. Please reach out and tell me how strengths have made a huge impact in your lives. If you're interested in going on that strengths journey, you can find more information about me at www.coreyweathers.com. I have an amazing team of military spouse clinicians and coaches that are trained to use the Gallup Strength Finder to help you find those superpowers, help you connect as a couple, and also can dive deeper on other issues as you need them. Thank you for the opportunity to invest in you, and I can't wait to hear how strengths impact you and your relationship.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final segment of this relationship intensive. I hope you have enjoyed the Military Marriage Day Summit and all of the amazing speakers who have shared to help us reconnect in our relationship. Now, for this final segment, we are definitely going to wrap things up with recommitment, but I have a question for you first. Are you confident in your marriage plan? I don't know. Are you confident in your marriage plan? Maybe you're saying, yeah, I'm confident, but my question then, the follow up question would be, what exactly are you confident in? I find that most couples don't really have a marriage plan or a marriage blueprint, like I'd like to say. It is something that you hope and you wish and you're excited for just being together. And that's nice, but you can't truly be confident in something that's not tangible, something that you don't have a clear vision of. I like to say that clear is kind. You are kind to your spouse when you are clear about the plans, your intentions, and the directions that you're going together in your relationship. Give them an opportunity to say yes to the same things, right? So you and your spouse both can say yes to something that you are aware of. I know that may sound very odd for this military life because there's a lot of uncertainty. But one thing that I can say and that has worked for our relationship is although military life may be uncertain, our plans and our goals for our marriage are very clear. So that is what we're going to walk through today. We are going to talk about your marriage goal, and we're going to make that super clear and design your marriage blueprint based off of your core values. Now, why is this based off of your core values? Well, it's very simple. What I may be saying yes to, what me and my husband may be saying yes to, could be very different than what you and your spouse are saying yes to. And that is okay. We want to ensure that you are clear about what you want for your marriage, that you are designing it according to those things that you are in agreement on, and that you can thrive in your marriage the way you want to thrive. I don't want these mediocre relationships. That is not what Military Marriage Day is all about. We want to see that flame burning bright in your relationships and being an example and a beacon, if you will, to other couples so that they can see, you know what? I want what they have. I want that light, that fire. And you know what? The military life offers an opportunity for me to get that too. So I'm going to walk you through how we're going to design our marriage bridge blueprint, as I like to say, because, I have a background in engineering, so bridges are a thing. And it's how I develop my care method. And what I like to say is for couples to thrive in their relationship, you have to care. C-A-R-E. Careful consideration, assess the foundation, reinforce the structure, and engage and trust. With these 4 phases, we will walk through a design that you can be confident in, that you can say yes to, and that you can recommit to. Are you ready? Let's go. We're going to start with phase 1, careful consideration. So when I think of careful consideration, I typically inform people to think of it like a purchase maybe that you want to make. You're hungry and you want something to eat. Typically, if I am going to a fast food restaurant, I try to look for a salad, but I typically want some type of burger with bacon and cheese, no pickles, no onions. Like I have a very specific order that I want. So I need to know the details of what will be inside the buns, right? What is in the buns of that sandwich? In addition to getting that, I also need to know how much it costs. So that's what careful consideration really breaks down for our couples. It allows you to look at what is in between the buns of your marriage, if you will. What are you designing to put in there? And then based off of what you want, what is the cost? What is that going to cost? What is it going to take for you to get that thing that you desire or that you crave in your relationship? So the way we're going to break this down is by talking about your hashtag marriage goal. So I want you to take a second, maybe even close your eyes and envision your marriage relationship in 20 years. Do this with your spouse and think about what you envision in your marriage in 20 years. How does it feel? What are some things that you are doing? How are you engaging and interacting with one another? Start having that dialogue with them and see what are some commonalities that you might find. This is an awesome opportunity for you to dream with your spouse. Think about what you could attain. What could you do together? What does your lifestyle look like? Maybe you're actively serving, or maybe you're not actively serving. Whatever that looks like for you, take the time and think about it and jot that down. Make sure that this marriage goal that you're coming up with is inclusive. It's not just about one individual, but collectively, what are you doing together? How do you feel together? What are activities you're doing together? We want to ensure that this goal is something that you both are excited about. So don't limit yourself. This is not the time to be realistic. This is the time for you to go after and really communicate what it is that you want in your marriage. So now that you have a goal and a vision in mind, let's start thinking about and carefully considering what is that going to take. I'll give you an example of our hashtag marriage goal, or something that I've communicated with my spouse before. One portion of our marriage goal is that I can envision us very clearly hanging out on some tropical beachfront property. My hair is long and gray and it is blowing in the wind. Our children are taken care of. We have left them an inheritance. We have flown out our family to join us on this tropical excursion. I'm drinking a fruity beverage at the time. My husband is peacefully resting next to me, and I am not bugging him at all, even though I'm the doer and he likes to rest, because I am content and satisfied and have everything that I need. Everything is in place. I am not worried or stressed. I can truly just pause and enjoy the moment as we watch the sunset. Now, that is just a glimpse of the picture that I hold with me for my marriage. But in talking through those details, there are several different components of that, right? There are components that I've considered, that my husband is more of a person that likes to rest. So the vision isn't us going and doing a whole bunch of things, but it also takes into consideration that I love the water and warm climates. So that's complementary in that way. There's also components in there that talk about financial goals that we would need to discuss to get there. Because as I mentioned, I want to be able to fly our entire family out to join us for that experience. Well, that may mean that we are getting ourselves set up via TSP for retirement. We are investing. We have taken care of debt. There are some financial components that go into making this big picture happen. That is what careful consideration is all about. Not just dreaming up this big grand vision, but also thinking through what are some of the steps that are needed to attain that. Now, I'm not saying that you need to figure out every little step by yourself. No. Identify some of the big components, though, that can help align you and get you moving in the right direction. My goal here with this summit and with the resource hub that we have on Military Marriage Day and our sponsors can kind of help piece together your plan to make this a reality. And even outside of the Military Marriage Day celebration, there are other people that you can partner with to get this vision under control and in a sequential order so that you know what your best next steps are. The idea here is that you've even started on the path with clarifying what that marriage goal looks like. Now, let's go to the next step or next phase, assessing the foundation. Now, this one, I love how Tori talked about earlier, that marriage why. you can bring some of that discussion right here into this phase with assessing the foundation. We absolutely want you to reflect back on your marriage. Why? What are those good things that are in the foundation of your marriage that are setting you up for success that you need to keep to build upon for your marriage blueprint? But we also want to consider what are some not so positive things? What are some negative things? What are some things that could be a barrier to you obtaining that marriage goal that we just discussed? Assessing the foundation gives you the opportunity to communicate personal things that you have control over in your relationship that you can address. What do I mean by that? This is not the opportunity to point fingers. No, we want you to point the finger back at yourself, take responsibility for things, and take ownership of some areas of improvement. What that may look like for me is that I can say personally that in our foundation, maybe my relationship with my parents need to be improved because they have impacted our relationship in some way. Well, that's my responsibility to talk to my family about those things so that we can continue to grow and move forward in our relationship. So empower one another to take responsibility for the things that you see in your foundation, the baggage, maybe getting clinical help or talking to a therapist about some traumas that may have gone on in the past. Be there to support one another through those tough conversations, because when you start digging into that foundation, you want to ensure that you have the support of one another and someone who is an expert in that field. Now, we're going to move on to reinforcing the structure. This is probably the least sexy of all of the phases, but I promise you it is absolutely necessary. So reinforcing the structure, I like to tell couples, deals with two main components. You're looking at rules in your marriage and you're looking at boundaries in your marriage. So what is a marriage rule? Well, that is something that you and your spouse need to determine, right? So it is often that couples do not talk about the rules, the do's and the don'ts in their relationship. And I think it becomes an opportunity for lines to get blurred as time goes on. Again, being clear is being kind. So these rules are something that you both will discuss and get on the same page with so that there's clarity in your marriage. So going back to my previous example about what our #marriage goal was, it had those financial components that are necessary to us achieving that goal. So maybe a rule that we set up in our relationship is that if we are going to make a purchase over $1,000, we have to talk to one another first and be agreed. That is a rule that we can set up for our relationship. It aligns and helps us get to that end goal of living this financially free lifestyle on the beach, right? But it's also a rule that helps us and aligns us and moves us closer in the direction that we want to go. It's not accusatory of either person. It is simply a parameter that we put in place to help us go in the desired direction that we want to go. So that is what a rule can look like in your relationship. Other rules regarding fidelity may you think are no-brainers, but I'm telling you, it is worth having the conversation, because what one person's upbringing is and the examples that they have versus another's can look very different. So being clear about what rules you'd like to set up in place for your marriage will help your marriage grow and move in a healthy direction. Now let's talk about boundaries for a second. Marriage boundaries are something that are for the individuals in the marriage, not for the people outside of the marriage. So what do I mean by that? If you establish a boundary that says that you as a couple will determine where you will spend the holidays, and you will let your family know once you have come to a decision, then when your in-laws tell you that you are going to be coming to their house or it's their turn, you, the couple, have to enforce that boundary that says, no, What we've decided is that we will collectively agree if we are even going anywhere for the holiday, and we will let you know and see if that works with your plan. We have to be agreed before you can enforce your plan on us. In all of this, the person that sets the boundary has to maintain the boundary. So other people may cross the line, but in order for the boundary to be upheld, you have to remind people over and over again that this line exists and where it is in the sand. So boundaries are very helpful for friends, for family, but also within your relationship. If you in your marriage relationship do not feel like you're getting enough rest, maybe a boundary that you put up in your relationship is that your quiet time, like your personal quiet time, is at a certain time frame, and that you will not answer the phone at this particular time. Could you make an exception possibly to this? That's your choosing, but if it is a boundary that is for the health and betterness of you, so that you can show up fully for your relationship and so that you can show up for your family, then you have to make the conscious decision to not answer that phone when it starts ringing during the times that you have set up for your personal care. So boundaries can be great ways to keep you aligned and moving in the direction of that big marriage goal. So again, reinforcing the structure, you want to ensure that you discuss rules and boundaries. Now, the fun part, the final phase of the care method, engage and trust. This phase is all about taking action, because you can't get anywhere if you are standing still. These are the opportunities for you to take the date nights, for you to do the small steps that you've carefully considered and put into action this game plan that you can now move out confidently together as a team. So the question that I have for you for this particular portion is, how will you implement this plan? Maybe you have a planning party. You whip out the calendar and you put that couple's vacation together on the calendar for your desired goal. Maybe it looks like having weekly budget meetings with your spouse. Maybe it looks like scheduling a sitter so that you can have date night. Whatever this action looks like, you need to, one, commit to doing it, and two, trust that it will get you to your end goal, that big marriage goal that you both are working towards. I hope that these 4 phases help you feel more confident in your marriage plan. We've walked through the full care method to carefully consider your goal and what it takes to get there, to assess the foundation and remove some of those barriers that may hinder you from getting there, reinforcing the structure through rules and boundaries so that you can continue to move in the direction of this goal, and to engage and trust, to take action, to move forward, and to live and go confidently forward with your spouse towards your marriage goal. So that is the care method. And now you are ready to recommit. With your marriage goal in mind, I want you to take a second and I want you to look at your spouse and say this recommitment portion together. Now, I'm going to read the recommitment, but maybe you aren't currently with your spouse. Don't worry. You can watch the replay with your spouse during a time that works for you so that you can have this recommitment moment. This is how we are concluding our Military Marriage Day Summit, and it is important that we end on this note where you feel confident in your marriage plan so that you can move forward and thrive even beyond Military Marriage Day. Let's recommit. So we are making a declaration of recommitment. I want you to say this statement aloud to one another. I'm going to read it and you will repeat after me. I, state your name, recommit myself to you. I promise to love, honor, and respect you, as you are my highest priority and valued partner. I promise today, as I did on our wedding day, to cherish you through whatever life brings us. I affirm my commitment to you and vow to care for you all of my life and with all of my heart. There, you've done it. You have recommitted to your military marriage, and we are celebrating with you. Thank you so much for investing in your relationship, for getting clear on your marriage goal, and taking the time to recommit. We are so thrilled to be wrapping up this Military Marriage Day segment. We would love to hear what you thought about this celebration for 2021, and we can't wait to continue to support you through your journey in this military life. Happy Military Marriage Day.